News Radio 610 WIOD. And folks, over the weekend, we've got the disturbing news that there was a major cybersecurity breach, not just in the United States, but around the world. And yesterday, technical staffs around the planet were scrambling to fix computers and restore infected ones amid fears that the ransomware worm that stopped car factories, hospitals, shops, and even schools could again unleash its havoc today as employees start to log back onto their computers. The virus, which was dubbed WannaCry, is known as ransomware, which locked up more than 200,000 computers across the country. And there is tremendous concern that today the havoc could spread some more. Here to talk to us about the implications of that is cybersecurity expert Shawn Tuma to tell you how to protect yourself from ransomware. Hey, Shawn, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Fernand. I appreciate you having me on.
Shawn, tell us about this. I mean, we've seen these types of breaches before, never to this extent, never to the degree of seeming effectiveness. Answer the question for those that are hearing about ransomware for the first time. What is it, and how do you protect yourself and your computer from ransomware?
Ransomware is a malicious program that, when it infects your computer, it basically encrypts all of the data on the computer so that you can no longer use the computer or access your data. And then it displays a message that says you must pay X amount of dollars, whatever that amount may be, in Bitcoin. And if you do not pay that within, a certain amount of time, the amount will go up. In this case, it starts at $300, then it escalates to $600. And if after a certain amount of time you still don't pay, then they will permanently disable your data by leaving it encrypted and cutting off communications with you.
So it's literally kidnapping your data, holding it hostage for a fee, and increasing the price if you decide not to pay, and losing your data forever potentially. Is that that's what you're saying, Shawn Tuma?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And it is, even before this event, in my practice as an attorney, this is the most common form of cybersecurity menace that I'm seeing right now in the cases I handle. And that's before this event happened on Friday. So now this has exponentially increased the prevalence of this really cyber disease.
And, what are the steps for most folks? I mean, let's be honest, Shawn Tuma. Most folks log on to their computer, they go through their emails, they surf online. They don't have the sophistication that many tech experts have. So, they're susceptible to these sorts of things. How does one protect themselves from falling victim to this hostage ransomware that's causing chaos around the world today?
The starting point is awareness. We can no longer go through cyber life on cruise control. We have to be aware. And the first thing, when you look at how this particular ransomware has spread, it took advantage of a security flaw or a patch, a hole that needed updating in Windows operating systems. So it attacked either old operating systems like Windows XP or Windows Server, or the older versions of Windows that did not have updated security, or newer versions that did not have those patches installed, those security updates. So when you log onto your computer and you get a message that says you need to update your security settings, people did not do that, and that's what this took advantage of, those vulnerabilities. The other thing is it spreads through what we call phishing, social engineering. And that's where, we're all familiar with the old Nigerian prince emails where they send us a message and say, I have 25 million.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just give me banking information, right? Well, they've gotten more sophisticated now. Now they send you something that purports to be from Federal Express or Amazon or your bank and says, just click this link. But it's not a legitimate link. It's a link to a malicious site that will download this kind of stuff. Or they send attachments that have malicious code buried in them. So the lesson there is when you receive emails from people or text messages or Facebook messages that aren't authentic, and you click on those links or download those attachments is the most common way they get these bad programs into your computer.
And you know what's even more sinister about it, as the more I read and become educated about this subject that I know you're an expert in, Shawn Tuma, is, how do I put it, the bad faith in which they go about it. They lay out a price that is accessible, which almost people might feel like it's an expensive parking ticket, because the cost of losing data, especially if it's one of these corporations that assembled years and years and even decades in some cases worth of data, might even be priceless. And you're reporting already that they've already made serious cash as a result of this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shawn Tuma.
No, that's exactly right. And you know, the other way to protect yourself is to have good backups of your data and of your systems. And they know that. So what they've done is they've evolved their tactics over the past year or 2 years, to where they now look for your backups, try to infect that first, then encrypt your primary network so that you lose your backups. So the key there is to have a good backup that's separate from your network. And you're right, they have made good money at this so far, but the real problem is you know, when we're talking about corporations, it's one thing. When we're talking about healthcare, and they really go after healthcare companies, including small little medical practices down to one physician, when they're encrypting that data and they no longer have access to that for treatment of patients, now we're talking about lives in many cases.
No question. No question.
You know, for the patients. And then it's a data breach for the organization that gets hit when you're in the healthcare industry. So it's a huge mess for small sums of money.
You know, Shawn, I've just got so many questions about this, and let me see as many I get to in the time we have left with you. Let's assume that you caught an unlucky break and they infected your data. They've asked for the ransom. What would you advise folks? I mean, would you just say, hey, go ahead and pay at this time and then take the steps? Or if you pay, you violate America's national security dictum, which is that you never negotiate with terrorists, in this case, cyber terrorists. What is the best course of action here if you're one of those unlucky folks that susceptible to this ransomware?
Well, number one, if you have a backup, use your backup, because that's the solution, is to have good backups. If you don't, you know, like you said, the FBI says don't pay. We don't want to see people paying because it encourages this nuisance to continue. But the practical side of it is many companies do pay. Many healthcare providers do pay. They don't always publicize it. But you know, when you look at the value of restoring your business to normal operations, or the value of getting your healthcare data back, that's a small price to pay. The problem there is oftentimes these people who are running these campaigns, these ransomware campaigns, either don't honor their commitment to unencrypt, or they don't really have the technical capabilities. They're buying kits.
That was my next question, Shawn. I mean, is this almost like a deal with the devil or a mafia-style arrangement where if you end up paying, then they just target you further and further? Or, from what you understand, do you actually get the data back in its form, or are they just going to kind of look at you as a mark and keep trying to hack into your systems?
All of it.
Wow.
It is a deal with the devil, and it varies. Sometimes you do get the data back, and it's clean and you're able to continue operations. Many times the data comes back in a very jumbled format, and you have to go through a lot of effort to make it work. But even in those cases, they now know you're someone who will pay a ransom, and so they know to keep coming back to you.
Mark, I'm sorry, Shawn, can you stick around with me for another segment? You got to run, or you got some time?
Sure. No, I'm happy to.
Okay, that way we can take some calls on this as well. I know a lot of folks are hearing about this for the first time. And folks, you know, just because it's not physical violence doesn't mean that this cyber violence can't be as devastating in its impact. If you have any questions, if you want to take advantage of having cybersecurity expert Shawn Tuma on with us, who can explain many of the things to do and not do when it comes to these ransomware attacks, now's your chance. 866-610-6397. Again, that number is 866-610-6397. AT&T mobile customers, a free call at *610. As we come back, with cybersecurity expert Shawn, who's going to tell you the do's and don'ts about what to do if you find yourself the victim of ransomware. Next on News Radio 610 WIOD.
News Radio 610 WIOD.
Fernando Monti back on News Radio 610 WIOD as we continue talking about the massive ransomware cyber attack that shut down computer systems all around the planet yesterday. A lot of experts think today could be just as bad as companies try and take the steps to restore and get their data back from these cyber terrorists who are holding the data hostage. And continuing with us is cybersecurity and data privacy attorney Shawn Tuma. And Shawn, before we went to break, you were suggesting what was being done, that in some cases a lot of these companies just have made the decision, in spite of the FBI's warning, to go ahead and pay the ransom to get their data back. I guess my second question about that, Shawn Tuma, is we seemingly spend so many resources, and you hear all the money and all the dollars that go to cybersecurity, yet these attacks continue to happen. Why is it that we seem to remain one step behind these hackers that are causing this carnage, data carnage, all around the world?
Well, that's a great question. You know, for one, there is an incredible profit motive for these people to carry out cybercrime. Cyber has become the new weapon of warfare, revolution, espionage, and crime. And so this is a much better tool for organized crime, for individual criminals to use to make money, and there's plenty of money to be made at it. That's one point. The second is we have, in dealing with cyber threats like this, we have an active adversary on the other side who, every time we make a move to defend, they make a move to then counter our defense and attack, and it's a continuous cycle. That's another point. But I think the biggest problem of all is, one, we haven't taken it serious enough, and we haven't looked at where the real risks come from. We look at the exotic, sophisticated kind of stuff we like to talk about at cocktail parties, like the Russians, you know, hacking with sophisticated things, the North Koreans, whatnot. But over 90% of the attacks each year come from basic failures, things like people with weak passwords, people clicking on links that, you know, like we talked about with the phishing emails, people not having an understanding of security questions. You know, a lot of these celebrity attacks we hear about, it's not really an attack as much as it is them putting information online that allows people to guess their passwords and then take over their account by Googling their information. It's not having basic policies and procedures in organizations to educate workers and you know, take care of those kind of things. That's where most of our failures come from, a lot of lost data that's not encrypted, lost devices. And so really what the adversary's doing is taking advantage of our weaknesses, because we tend to focus on things that are much more sophisticated, because that's where a lot of the fun and the money is, and not the true symptoms of the problem.
Shawn Tuma, I recognize that this next question is utterly in the realm of the speculative, but Shawn, you've hinted over and over again throughout this conversation this morning, they, them, those people that are doing this. Do we have any sense as to the behavioral profile or even the actual profile? Who is behind these things? Because this isn't being done by one person. This is clearly a criminal syndicate. It's a group that is conscientiously and wittingly putting this type of cyber terrorism out there, these cyber hostage hacks. Who do we know might be behind these cyber ransomware episodes?
A lot of times it is organized crime. There are organized crime syndicates who now favor cyber crime as opposed to traditional drugs, prostitution, things like that. That's one group. Another group is when these people create the initial code and the application to run these ransomware campaigns, they put the the campaign for sale on the dark net, so that someone who wants to do it themselves can go and buy the kit for sometimes, $300, $400, $500, under $1,000, and then run their own campaigns. So it's a exponentially spreading type effect. And in this situation, we're seeing a sort of political / policy debate coming up, because the exploit, the code that's being used to run this attack, originally came, we believe, from the NSA and a group called the Shadow Brokers, who are professional hackers, if you will, organized criminals, stole that code or obtained it and then disclosed it. So it can be any number of people, from government-sponsored in some cases, down to organized crime, down to individuals working together, down to some guy in a tent in a third world country that has nothing but a laptop and an internet connection.
Shawn, Tuma, when we think about protecting the nation's defense and the nation's people, which is the number one responsibility of any government, you think of armies, you think of military, you think of planes and soldiers and human resources on the ground, and in the famous expression, boots on the ground. Do you think, Shawn, Tuma, are we at the point where a computer specialist may be just as important as a civilian soldier in the defense of the nation's cybersecurity? Are we at that point where you might see an increased attention and recruitment paid to America's cyber soldiers protecting these types of breaches from taking place?
Fernand, we are beyond that point. We have reached that point, and we are beyond it. Cyber is the new weapon of warfare. We saw it really prevalent in 2010 when it was used to take out the Iranian nuclear enrichment program through the Stuxnet virus, and we've seen it weaponized more and more ever since. Now, cyber is the forefront of our nation's defenses, both in a military capacity, in an intelligence capacity for our intelligence agencies, as well as protecting our national infrastructure and our economic system. So cyber is the new number one at the top of the heap there, and it should be treated as such. So, yeah, when you say increased enlistment bonuses and things of that nature, cyber is where we really have to be focusing.
Chilling words from Shawn Tuma. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning. We'll have you on again, Shawn.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Fernand.
All right, everybody, when we come back, I want to tell you what I finally agree with that Ann Coulter, yes, Ann Coulter said.
Believe it or not.
Next on the Fernand Amandi Show on News Radio 610 WIOD.